I'd like to call to order the November 27th meeting of the Hazlet Board of Education. Would everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our next, first item of business, next item of business is correspondence. Do we have any tonight, Dan? Okay. Next would be comments from the public. Is there anyone who would care to make comments from the public? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to the student representative report, and we have Reagan Russell here with us this evening.
Raleigh second grade concert will be on December 13th at 6:30 p.m. in the Raleigh gym. Their holiday store will be open during recess the week of December 4th for students to shop at. Murphy fifth graders have been preparing for their concert Rock and Roll Forever, which will take place Thursday night in the school multipurpose room. The Murphy PTO is sponsoring a holiday gift shop. Students will shop during their lunch recess. The middle school students had their annual food drive to benefit the Hazlet Food Pantry. Students collected over 4,000 items to donate this year. The PALs delivered these items on Tuesday before the holiday break. A huge thank you to the Viking Time teachers for promoting this activity and to Mrs. Fisher for organizing the event. As part of an ongoing effort to educate parents about different adolescent issues, tonight HMS is hosting Kate Stevenson, a licensed marriage and family therapist, to talk about adolescent anxiety and how anxiety manifests itself in young people, and what parents can do to support the emotional well-being of their child. HMS students will be conducting their third annual Sparrows Children's Center drive. They are seeking donations of crayons, coloring books, and fleece blankets to help make the hospital a bit more comfy and enjoyable, so the children have to be there over the holidays. All high school winter sports have now officially began. November Student of the Month will be held on Wednesday, and the annual French trip to Chicago will take place on Friday, December 1st.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Our next item of business will be the superintendent's report.
Thank you, President Cody. Just a few things this evening. First of all, I'd like to say congrats to the cast and crew of Bye Bye Birdie. Adam Boyce, Mavala, Pat Hepfer, and Dave Gott, and the cast and crew for all those who participated in the fall musical Bye Bye Birdie for their great performances. I was able to go out on staff night on Thursday, and it was really, really a great show. It was a very well-balanced show, and I thought it was very well done. So congratulations to all the cast and crew. And then I actually just got today in the mail 2 letters from the Hazlet Community Food Pantry for the food drives that were held both at the middle school and at the high school. One was addressed to Susan Fisher. Thanks for the fantastic food drive at the middle school. They collected over 3,400 pounds of food and personal care items for the food pantry. And at the high school, they collected over 53 turkeys and 1 ton of food for the pantry. So congratulations to both the Hazlet Middle School and High School for their food drives in November. The food pantry serves, over the Christmas Giving Project, serves over 100 families in need in the Hazlet School District. So thank you to both the Hazlet Middle School and the high school. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much. We will move on to our discussion items. The first one is an update on the mental health awareness plan, which has been an effort that the district's undertaking this year, and I'll leave it up to Superintendent Cook to share that with us.
Okay, so what I thought I'd do tonight is Sharon and I kind of tag team a little on this issue, but what I wanted to do is, as you know, one of the district goal areas has to do with providing a safe and respectful, disciplined environment for all students. And the 2 initiatives goals that we have under that area, first of all, was the Be Nice program, which we implemented this year. And then the second was to develop a student suicide awareness program, which really we're kind of calling more of a mental health awareness program now, so that it encompasses more than just suicide in itself. So I thought I'd talk, first of all, just a little about Be Nice. You're all familiar with that program. Be Nice stands for Notice, Invite, Challenge, and Empower. The one really attractive thing about this program when we first got into it, it's that it's not a one-time initiative. It's actually a program that goes out throughout the year, and it's not just a program that stands alone. It actually helps enhance our current programs that we have ongoing at all of our buildings. We currently have the PBIs program. We also have comprehensive and guidance that's going on K-8, where our counselors are teaching sessions on comprehensive guidance and counseling to all of our students in K-8. And so the Be Nice initiative, as you know, was a good program because it really kind of enhanced what we're currently doing. And so it really fit nice in terms of part of our plan. So, it started out, yeah, part of the plan, sorry. It started out, we introduced this in a Blackboard article in May of 2017. I put out a welcome back letter in August, which kind of introduced the programs. And then all the buildings have sent out communications in the newsletters about the program itself. And so each of the building has had a formal kickoff of the Be Nice program. Sharon and I actually got to attend the middle school program, which was held last week. It was very, very well done. It was an hour long. It was actually organized by Susan Fisher, and it was really student-driven. All the students kind of participated and did little skits and such to talk about Be Nice and what that initiative looked like. We also had some testimonies from a couple of our teachers, that Ben Panetta and Laura Allen. That was very well done. So that was a really nice program. Each of the elementaries has done a formal kickoff at each one of their buildings. So we're kind of just starting that program in each one of the buildings. And so the elementary, what they're doing is they have, at Raleigh and Murphy, they have Monday morning meetings. And so each of those Monday morning meetings, once a month, they talk about what the topic is going to be for Be Nice for that month. And then what happens is the general ed teachers actually do a 30 to 40-minute session once a month on whatever that topic is in each one of the grade levels at elementary. And Wilkshire does the same thing. They have what they call their bucket assembly. It's kind of the same thing, Monday morning meetings, where they talk to the students about what the topic is for that particular month. And then their general ed teachers actually do the same thing. They do about a 30 to 40-minute discussion with students in each one of the general ed classrooms. And then at secondary, they're actually using Viking time. They're doing a similar type of thing once a month. That's the old prime time. They're now calling it Viking time. So once a month, they do the same thing. It's about a 22-minute block of time that they have, that they're doing the Be Nice updates, just like they're doing at elementary. And then at high school, they're doing a similar thing once a month. They're actually doing it in second hour. They're blocking off one particular time during second hour once a month, where they're actually doing the same types of things. So as you can see, it's kind of a K-12 initiative. That was the one nice thing about this. It wasn't just a one specific area program. It was actually done K-12. So that's pretty much what's going on. We're going to hopefully be evaluating the program as we go throughout the year. At the end of the year, we'll get together. Each of the buildings has a Be Nice committee, which is made up of all of their mental health professionals, their counselors, the school psychologists, in addition to students and also teachers. And so at the end of the year, we'll evaluate the program to determine what we potentially can do to make it better, what went right, what went wrong, and hopefully we can get some feedback from all the participants to hopefully make that program better for next year. So that's pretty much Be Nice. Like I say, it's once a month, and it's ongoing. So any questions with regard to, Sharon, I don't know if you have anything to add?
No, you did well.
Great.
Just really quickly, can you briefly, if you want, explain how our educators were kind of taught or briefed on the program before school started?
So we actually had a training session. Be Nice, they came in for, was it 2 days?
They came in for a morning session, and then they did a pretty thorough training in the afternoon for people at the buildings who would be implementing.
So it was Be Nice committee team
I think it
members.
was,
Came in for a couple
yes.
days, okay.
And then from there, we provided release time for our building reps to actually develop the program further. The lesson plans are rather simple, and so each building had to take those plans and enhance upon them in order to really put forth the effort they're doing now. So it's a little different at every level on every building based on the creativity of those building people.
And then after, you said this year, we're gonna kind of reevaluate and try to talk about with the committees in each building and see how we make it better. Is there then an ability to interact with the Be Nice people after that to kind of discuss some enhancements that we make? And
Well, we paid a one-time fee for the program, so next year it's actually no cost, but Be Nice is always available to come in and do additional trainings over and above what they did as a part of the original cost. So we're contemplating doing some type of a parent training next year. So we can either bring them in or another group to do that, but they do offer other types of professional development series within what they offer as a part of the program, so.
Thank you.
I think one of the things the elementary folks and the middle school are concerned about is that those lessons are varied from year to year. So, for example, in grade 6, you wouldn't want to repeat all those lessons that we did 6, 7, 8 this year, next year. Because your seventh graders and eighth graders would be doing that over again. So the challenge is to do a little spin on that. So after a 3-year or 4-year plan, like at Raleigh or Murphy, 4 years, you would have a 4-year plan that would be slightly different from year to year. And then you could do it over. So there is a plan to look at that same way at Wilkshire. You're going to have things you're doing in kindergarten. You don't want to do those same things in first grade. But this year, everyone can do the same thing. Next year, first grade has to do something different. So those are the challenges, and that is not provided with Be Nice. So we would have to develop that ourselves, which is not problematic, but it's something we would have to do.
Did you have a question?
Well, first off, I was going to ask about parent involvement, so I'm glad to hear we're contemplating some sort of parent session, so that parents know what's happening so that they can reinforce at home. But the other thing in the long term, what I'm always interested in, is how this program enables our students to step up and not just learn and check off a box, but how does this enable them to step up when this situation arises? There's a student in need, there's a problem situation, however, whatever it is, how do they act? And so in the long term, I'm really interested in seeing, and I know it's also difficult to measure, but how does this encourage them, enable them, empower them to take an action when one might be warranted?
Well, and we have not developed that evaluation tool yet. So part of the evaluation at the end of the year would be to take a look at how could we measure the effectiveness of Be Nice? And we should always do that. And if it's not effective, how can we make changes so that it becomes more effective? So we haven't done that piece. We really aren't familiar enough with, you almost have to live it for a year and see how it works, and then try to get responses not only from staff, but I think we need responses from our students.
So do the Be Nice teams in the different schools communicate with each other to share ideas? And I'm also thinking like current 5th graders going to 6th grade so that they're not repeating things. You know, we obviously don't want them repeating in the same building, but also as they move forward to the next building.
Well, the curriculum, as I understand it, that's provided by Be Nice is different at grade 6 than grade 5. But you have elementary modules that are kind of ungraded, and then you have middle school modules that are kind of ungraded. So it's not the challenge from 5 to 6 or 8 to 9. It's more the challenge within those grade configurations.
So I was going to ask what the break was. So it's just one elementary, K-5 is the same
Yes.
thing?
Well, it's similar. There are 40 lessons or something for K-5. But you have to, figure out, well, how many of those lessons are you going to focus on in kindergarten and first grade? What does that look like? And then how are they going to implement that? In terms of the connection, I think Steve's going to talk about this mental health team, district mental health team that we also have. They are all part of the Be Nice building teams. So those folks have an opportunity once a month to talk about Be Nice. So they do communicate in a structured way, but I'm sure they do in an unstructured way. But there is a time once a month to talk about that.
The one nice thing too is all those mental health professionals, like our psychologists, our social workers, are now our employees. We used to contract those folks with the ISD years ago, and we've now hired all those folks internally. So they're really part of our team, and it really, I think, helps us in terms of a district as we move forward with a total plan, is that those folks are here every day, they're working with our kids, they're working with the other staff, and they have a really good understanding of what's going on in our building. So that's been very beneficial to us.
I haven't obviously seen any of the lesson plans or actually, what the teachers are doing, but, often some stuff, if it's reinforcing something important and the students really aren't hearing it, elsewhere, there may not be something wrong with doing it
Right,
once a year.
right.
You know, there are things that just the students can use, remind, maybe you're having some conversations in a different context, but depending on exactly how that, how that's set up, it may be good things that every September you are reinforcing this and October that, and,
Well, I know, for an example, Wilkshire is primarily focusing on the N, the notice. Just for their students, it's notice. What are you noticing about each other? When do you notice if someone is having a bad day or isn't happy? So they're not trying to embrace all of those strategies. They're just looking at noticing.
makes
So-
sense.
And I think once we get through the year,
Right.
our teachers will figure out what works best and where certain things fit best.
Well, it'll be interesting to hear the feedback from the students, too. You've got students on these
Absolutely.
committees, and, whether, again, stuff seems dumb to them, or makes a difference, or,
Well, does the Be Nice package, if you will, does that have any evaluation tools? I mean, as basic as like a satisfaction survey? So that's more process oriented as opposed to outcomes.
I don't know for sure,
Okay.
but we'll certainly
Dig in.
dig in a little later. I said to Steve, this is a little soon. We're just wading in the
starting.
water here.
Well, the nice thing, I know that the feedback I've gotten from the principals is that even though the lessons are simple, they're flexible. So each of the, like elementaries work together, all of their stuff is done on the same week, so their lesson plans are all done on the same week. So they're trying to stick together, and they're trying to develop lesson plans that are consistent amongst elementary, middle school, and high school too. So, so as we move on, some of those lessons may be modified depending upon what the need may be for that particular year or whatever that might look like. So I think there's some flexibility that that we can change some of that curriculum as we go. Nothing else?
Okay.
Okay, so the second goal item had to do with developing a suicide awareness plan, and as I mentioned, we're kind of looking at more as a mental health awareness plan, because there's a lot of issues. It's not just suicide that our students are dealing with in terms of anxiety and a lot of other issues that students deal with on a daily basis. So as this kind of started out, we weren't really sure what this was going to look like. And so one of the things that Sharon and I did is that we met with Laura Van Dyne from Cedar Springs this summer. We spent a good part of the whole afternoon with her, and just kind of, Cedar Springs is a district that suffered multiple suicides in their district in a very short period of time, so they had to deal with a lot all at once. And so she shared a lot of different ideas with us in terms of what they did and how they approached different issues, not just suicide, but a lot of the issues that they dealt with those issues. And so, so we spent some time with her. We got some feedback, and what she did is that she actually turned us on to a regional group. It's the Regional Youth Prevention Suicide Alliance, and they meet, I believe, on a quarterly basis. And Sharon and I were not able to attend the first meeting, but we sent 5 of that mental health awareness team to that particular conference, and they really, really liked it. And so they're participating in that on a regular basis now, and so we're connecting with, and basically that alliance is made up of other districts that have had similar incidents, and so they're kind of working together as districts to try to come up with certain protocols and certain things that they're doing in their individual district and sharing ideas. And I think it's a good opportunity for those like-minded types of professionals to get together and understand what other districts are doing. So what we decided to do is we put together our own, as we call it, kind of a district crisis team for mental health. And so, as it turns out, that's made up of our counselors, social workers, psychologists, and it's actually headed by our special ed director, Pam Pinozo-Jones. And they meet on a monthly basis. And really, one of their main goals is to try to come up with a suicide protocol in terms of what that looks like and how the things that are done in terms of what that looks like in our district. And they're trying to develop something that's consistent across the district, and so that all of our buildings are kind of handling those issues on a different basis. Now, obviously, elementary is different than secondary, but they wanted to kind of come up with a consistent protocol across the district. And they actually were able to get, I believe, one of the districts that's part of that alliance, Montague Schools, they actually have their own suicide kind of protocol, and they shared all of their documents with us, and we were able actually to use a lot of the information as we're kind of trying to put together our own document in terms of what that looks like for our district individually. In addition, there's a crisis intervention team that Regional Alliance also came up with a group on the west side that 8 of our members are going to be attending. I believe it's actually November 30th this week in Cedar Springs. And it just talks about crisis intervention, different occurrences that happen in districts and how they handle that, what steps go on in terms of when a crisis happens in a district. And so it's just another opportunity to share ideas in terms of what's going on in other districts. And so we're hoping that's also going to be beneficial for our district in a whole. So one of the other things that we're looking at is training. What are we going to do in terms of training? We have kind of a couple alternatives on the table right now. Sharon, if you want to talk a little about what that looks
Well,
like.
we contacted Be Nice. They also do training for staff and
You're
parent
talking about
training.
training in
Suicide
recognition.
recognition. And they do a training session, and they're fairly expensive, but they're very willing to do that. We have also a contact from the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and they're very active. I think they had a walk a few weeks ago. And one of our teachers at the middle school, Stephanie Brookhouse, is very involved with that group, and she and I met this afternoon to talk about possible staff training, and they're willing to come out and do training for us. They have kind of a package that they've put together, and they will facilitate that free of charge. So we're in the process, Steve and I, of looking at the videos with that that are associated with that program and talking to the regional director for Michigan and possibly doing a 2-part staff training. The first would occur sometime late winter, January, February, and the second would be a training that would occur maybe in August at the beginning. And so we could kind of review what we talked about in the winter and then kind of move forward to have it span across a couple of years. One of our concerns is the sustainability of this training and how do you continue after, after the second year, the third year, the fourth year, and you get new employees, and how do you, continue to impress and educate staff. So that is an option for us as well. We have not been able to make a decision yet. We feel like we need a little more information. And then, I don't want to steal your thunder, but then again, looking at next year to add that parent component. So kind of focus on staff this year, get a district team together, and then move into continuing with staff and focusing on parents in 18, 19. I shouldn't say just staff this year, because obviously with Be Nice, we're doing a huge focus on students. So students and staff, and then continue with staff and move into parents. So that's kind of a vision for a couple of years. And like with anything, you start and sometimes you have to turn and veer off the road for a little while and move back on, because you're not sure what works and what doesn't work. But
One of the messages that we heard from Laura from Cedar Springs is that one of her suggestions is make sure that you move slow, that you don't go too fast into this,
Right.
that you really come up with a plan and you really think it through and what works for your district, because what works for one district may not work for others. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking, is moving slow and determining what those levels of trainings that we need and when we might do them.
And you talked about the middle school parent council tonight, and I did get a text from Mona K. Woodhams a few minutes ago that said we have a full house tonight. So that is just wonderful, because sometimes, as you know, we do parent awareness sessions and we have very few people that come. So there's definitely a need when parents show up. So that is really very good. I did get a copy of the PowerPoint, so at some point maybe Susan or Mona K. could share some of that information with us.
So really, we're looking to that district crisis team to give us some direction on how we move forward in terms of some of these areas, because they're dealing with those issues on a daily basis. Social workers, our counselors, our psychologists, they're working with kids every day, and they can kind of see what's going on. And so we're kind of leaving that up to that group to give us some direction in terms of where we go. And with the assistance of those other districts through those regional networks that we're trying to establish and what that looks like for our district for the
Yeah,
future.
I think we see them as an advisory board almost, a group of people. They're a wide variety of people with a wide variety of experience, some with short-term experience, some with long-term experience. So we look to them to, what do you think, kind of? We're thinking about doing this, what do you think? And these folks are very willing to share their opinions, which is very helpful when you're in a decision-making mode, so.
It's awesome to have the whole K-12, look at it too. It's easy to think of some of these issues are teenage problems and while they might manifest themselves in a completely different way at middle school and high school, starting some of that common approach and language and terms and references.
Well, and many of these folks have been with us for quite a while, even the ISD employees that now work for us and no longer work for the ISD, they've been assigned to Hazlet for a few years, so they're very familiar with us and our culture and what works here and what doesn't, and they're highly regarded professionals, so it's really a valuable group of people.
Well, I think it's also, I'm really hopeful that the Be Nice program sets a stage somewhat, and hopefully we learn a lot from students through that program, that they may feel more comfortable expressing some of the things that cause anxiety, or any number of things. We may learn a lot from them about where the mental health side of the program really needs to go. Because as the curriculum demands heighten, I can only imagine what it's like to be a student these days. It's not easy.
Any other questions?
Awesome. Okay, well, thanks for the update.
Yep,
Appreciate it.
absolutely. Thanks, Sharon.
Okay, so our second discussion is, and this actually is something, if you guys remember when we talked a number of months ago about some of the things we thought would be helpful to learn, one of the things was, well, what kinds of laws have changed that have made us have to do certain things over the recent times? And so Sharon's compiled the list.
Actually, with the help of True Law, because they actually came to do a presentation for our administrators, so it was very nice to have their expertise that I could share with you. I guess what surprises me the most, and Michelle will show you the next list, is, what are there, 2, 4, 6, 8 in the last maybe 14 months or so that are new mandates, law changes for schools. And they run the gamut from curriculum to discipline to a whole variety of things. But it shocks me to think of all the new things that our staff has to learn, understand, and then in the course of that actually implement through either instruction or how they manage students and parents. So the first one, transgender students, and we, as you know, participated in a huge training at the board level as well as at the administrative level as well as at the staff level. So we have really done our due diligence, I think, in this area in terms of providing the changes that are required of us as educators. And as you look at the second slide, it talks about that the Michigan Department of Ed guidance really looks to us to consider our students as individuals and to look for solutions, not problems. And the board needs to know we have faced some of these situations, and I think from my perspective, our principals have done a great job in looking for solutions, working with students and working with their families to provide the best for each one of them, and then watch and respond to possible harassment, which is, of course, going to affect the issue we just got done talking about in terms of mental health for students. So it's a wide open area right now, and we're working through that. The other piece is the new weapon expulsion exemption. If you recall, several years ago, there was kind of a no tolerance position where if you brought even a butter knife to school that was the wrong length, you were out. And so that has been changed, and now we're not required to expel a student for a weapon offense. There are exemptions for that, and we have had some incidents in the last year where we have actually taken this directive and not put a student out because they weren't possessing the item for a weapon. They weren't intending to use it as a weapon. In some cases, the student may or may not know they have it. That seems a little odd to me, to think that I don't have a knife on me or another weapon, but it could have been put in my pocket, me not knowing. We do have students that may or may not realize it's a dangerous weapon, and even that to discern whether that's true or not. And we've not had this, but I suppose you could have a student have a weapon where they have permission to bring such to school. So those are things we can take a look at now and not just quickly say, sorry, you're gone. You can't come back. The zero tolerance, we are actually working on this right now as administrators because the law states very clearly that before suspending, and we don't expel, we haven't expelled a student in Hazlet for many, many years, but before suspending a student, you must consider these factors. And that wasn't really how we were operating a year or so ago. We would, if a student did something, they were gone for a day or gone for 3 days. Just, you're out, you're suspended. But now we really have to look at the more restorative practices and to carefully think about how old is the student, have they ever had a discipline problem, is this a first or is this the 8th or 10th of many times, do they have a disability? Now we've always looked at disability because students with disabilities do have a limitation on the number of days they can be suspended. But you need to look at the seriousness of the behavior, whether it's a safety risk, and whether lesser interventions, and I think that's really the key to zero tolerance, is whether you can do something else besides suspend. For example, could the student apologize? Could they do community service? Could there be restitution? Could there be other ways for them to understand that what they did was not appropriate behavior? So we have to not only consider this, but we do have to record in our student systems what happened to the student and actually report that to the state at the end of the year. So at the end of the year, there's a reporting device. I haven't seen that yet. I don't know where it's going to be, but we will have to actually go through, and we suspended so many students for so many days for these reasons, and here are the other things we did in lieu of suspending students. So the state is going to monitor that and going to look at us very carefully, and that is something it is a change in practice for us. Let's put it that way, more at the secondary level than at the elementary level. Seclusion and restraint, if you look back at the previous slide, that is new. It was effective March 29th of 2017, but we were really wrapping our arms and heads around it at that time, really thinking about the seclusion of students for behavior. This is mostly for not behaving appropriately or restraining a student. Seclusion meaning to confine a student in a space where they're physically prevented from leaving. That usually occurred in a safe room. Or restraining them that would restrict them from moving. And there are various kinds of restraint: physical restraint, mechanical restraint. We rarely restrained a student. We implemented seclusion more than restraint, but there are times when Students are very physically active, and there's nothing else you can do but to physically restrain them. This law limits the use of seclusion and restraint in schools to emergency situations only. And the key here is emergency. What does that mean? It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To the classroom teacher, where there are 20 or 25 other students in their classroom, and you have a student who is acting out, they think that's an emergency situation, and it may or may not be. And it has to pose a safety risk, not a risk to property, so a safety risk to the student or those around them. So the student could be destructive to property, but that's not considered a good enough reason to restrain. So again, this is a struggle. I would tell you this occurs primarily at the elementary level, where we were secluding children, not at the secondary level as much. But our incidents have gone down dramatically in the last year, I would say. I don't even want to guess, but dramatically less than they were, because we're very aware of the law, and we're very aware of what we can and cannot do. Again, these incidents have to be reported to Michigan Department of Ed at the end of the year. So,
Sure. Did you have to report incidents prior to this law, or the
you,
reporting is
we
even
did
new?
in something called CEPI, but it wasn't very specific.
Okay.
So it was almost, almost a ridiculous report. I don't think it really had much meaning. I haven't seen what this looks like yet, but I assume, excuse me, I assume it's going to be much more specific.
Thank you.
Seclusion, excuse me.
You had mentioned, just to clarify, on, when you talk about limit the use of seclusion restraint to emergency situations, the state didn't give a
Well, no.
definition of that, or?
Well, other
anything?
than
Is
you can't look at property as being
Right.
an emergency situation. Or you
Right.
can't look at a student, for example, who decides to sit under the table and refuses to come out from under the table. That's not an emergency situation. Now, from a teacher's perspective, they might feel that that is. They don't want the student sitting under the table. They want the student to come out and sit at the table. And so again, we had to really talk to our folks about what this looks like and what it doesn't look like.
You're right, that's gotta be difficult. People-
Well, everybody
define
defines that
emergency in
just a
different
little
ways.
bit differently.
Like, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Then with this law came the training piece. And so we were required to train all employees. That includes substitute teachers. And that training had to be, at the very minimum, awareness training. And so we contract for our substitute teachers through a third-party contractor called EduStaff. And so they actually have to view a module that talks about seclusion and restraint before they can be substitute teachers for us. So our substitute teachers were all covered. We did have Troon come and do a seclusion and restraint training for all staff, paraprofessionals and teachers in August when we did the back-to-school training for our folks. And then we had recently, Pam Jones did a training with all of our bus drivers. And we had one of our social workers who is a trainer come and actually do situational training with bus drivers. Okay, if this happens and this happens, this is what it looks like, this is what you would do. And so we've actually had 2 trainings with our bus drivers this fall to talk about ways to handle behaviors that are inappropriate. And I think our bus drivers are very appreciative of having a little more training and a little more understanding of what certain students are able to do or not do. We also are required by the state to have key building personnel in each of our buildings, and we're in the process of identifying those key people. They have to have CPR training and something called CPI training, which is crisis prevention intervention training. And we do have a social worker who is a trainer for CPI. But that is really using how to use your words to help a student come down from being out of control to a more controlled situation. And we will have shortly at least 5 adults at every building who will be considered key personnel, and they will have CPR as well as CPI trained. So this particular law brought lots of things with it. Lots of requirements for us as a district to make sure that our teachers and our other employees were trained. The challenge here, of course, is how do you sustain that? When you're first implementing, you can bring everybody together. Now we have 20 new employees, what do? Or now you have 5 new people here, what do you do? And so actually Steve and I have been looking at some module training that's provided with SETSEG called Safe Schools, and it provides some ability for us to then assign. Dan's a new employee of ours. We're going in, we're going to assign these particular modules before he works. Not only does he have to get fingerprinted, but he has to at least view these training modules. Is that kind of training ideal? Probably not, but at least it meets the letter of the law, and then we can provide additional training if we need to.
So is the training requirement, they just have to be trained once, or is there kind of an ongoing expectation
Well,
of
I
training?
believe, and there are a whole series of trainings, we looked at that earlier this year. I think, I want to say, I don't know, 10 or 12 different things that people are required to have. Some of them are annual, and some of them are once.
Okay.
And I want to say this is once. So you're hired in 2020, we train you, you're good. But there are trainings like bloodborne pathogens training and some other things that are required annually. And so really, as we look to getting into a system which allows us to do that more easily, and then also keep track, we can look Greg up on the system and we can see he had these trainings and these are the years, and because it's going to be very difficult just to keep track of who's been trained and who hasn't and when and all of that kind of stuff. Third grade reading law, I don't want to spend very little time on this. You've been schooled on third grade reading law. You know, of course, that it really is applicable to our present first graders. And unless they have a good cause exemption, those things listed there among others, they will or be it will be suggested that they be retained. We have just recently done a training on the third grade reading law for all of our elementary teachers, just because we felt that it was important, even if they were 4th or 5th grade teachers, that they understand what the third grade reading law means. And we just, you may know that we have a new mentoring program this year. We have our teachers involved with mentoring, and we have, was it last week, Tuesday? Last week, Tuesday or Monday, we had our first required joint mentor-mentor meeting, mentor-mentee meeting, and we did the 1-hour third grade reading law presentation with our secondary mentor-mentees, and it was fascinating. They were very interested in it, even though they are very much removed from it. One of our secondary teachers said, "Does that mean all of the students in my science classroom will be able to read?" And we said, "Well, we hope so." But, so anyway, what I thought you'd be interested in knowing is what we were already doing many of the things that were required in this law. So it wasn't a huge stretch for us. However, we are needing to target and do more intensive interventions for students who've been identified with a deficiency. No longer can we say, well, we can only service 35 students, and it's too bad we have 40. these 5 will be left out. We really can't do that. We have to service all, and so that has been a little bit new for us. We have to provide parents with a home reading program. So that is something, we were doing some of that, but not to the degree that this law requires. And then to make sure that we have professional development programs for teachers in grades K through 3. So these were kind of 3 things that we had to say, are we doing this? How can we do it more intentionally? This year, 2017-18, this goes into play, CPR AED program, and we are required to have all of our students at least once in grades 7 through 12 have to have CPR training. So we are including this in 7th grade through a health PE program, so all our students will have an awareness and have CPR training. We are not required to have the training so that they get a certification. We are only required, it's pretty much awareness training. But we are required, and at this point in time, we aren't required to make sure that everybody, so if Cammie's absent tomorrow, we don't necessarily have to go back and make that up with her. But
She wasn't here in 7th grade.
if she wasn't here in 7th grade and comes in 8th grade, we don't have to go back and do that yet. Right now. So we are going to offer it for all our 7th graders, and we have a plan for that. And we have also decided to offer it to either 9th or 10th graders, depending on when they take biology. So just because we think it's a good thing to do. So at least, we're not required by law, but we will do that. I put 9th graders, but I rethink that. I think it's going to be through our biology class, and it will be either 9th or 10th.
So to clarify, it sounds like it is, the law is, it has to be in the curriculum, but it's not a technically graduation requirement
It's
that's
not a
going to show up
graduation.
on the transcript.
You're right. Unlike the health requirement, that's a graduation requirement.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So genocide education was effective actually a year ago, 2016-17, and it requires age grade appropriate curriculum in grades 8 through 12, including Holocaust and Armenian genocide. The curriculum must include 6 hours of instruction. So I was a little worried about this, but talking with Mr. Smith at the high school, he says, no problems, we're meeting these requirements in our curriculum. We teach it in 9th grade, U.S. history, geography, and English, and we teach it in 11th grade, world history, geography. So that really was not a shock for us. It wasn't anything we had to add. We were already doing this. But it is,
graduation requirements, so every student will have.
every student is required to either take or test out of U.S. history, 9th grade English, and world history. So every student would have that. And then the naturalization test questions. Actually, I don't think this is a bad idea, but the Michigan State Board of Education shall revise their social studies content standards. Now, that's what's amusing, because the Michigan Department of Education, or the Michigan State Board of Education, has been attempting to pass the new social studies requirements for, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years, and they've postponed it once again. So I'm not certain when this will really happen, but that they want the standards to cover the same content as covered by the 100 questions on the civics portion of the naturalization test. And so effective no later than May 1, or the next update of the social studies content standards after March 2017. I'm not positive the social studies standards will be effective, or they will approve them prior to May of this upcoming year, but just know that that is in there. We have talked about, we haven't done this yet, but we are talking about using the naturalization test just because. And people feel that it's not particularly difficult, and it would be easy for us just to include it. Right. So we have talked about this. This isn't a hard thing for us to do. So, but those are all the things, and I'm sure there are more on the docket that we are expected to be aware of and implement. In addition to all the other things that we do have to implement.
The restraint, it's interesting, in my 30 years, I only had one significant restraint teaching thing, although I was the person, whenever there was a fight, somebody grabbed and said, there's a fight. You try to break that up. You know, it's just because I'm a male and strong and whatever, so. The more extensive training, was that called the CP, I get confused the alphabet soup sometimes. CPI. So do you have people strategically located for that type of thing, or is it more students people who work with a population that are more at risk for that behavior?
We provide CPI training for all our special education teachers who have basic classrooms. So if you have an EI classroom, or you have a ASD classroom, or where you're more typically going to be encountering students who have behavior that may require them to be restrained, those professionals have been trained. We also require all the paraprofessionals who are placed in those particular classrooms to have CPI training. And it includes not only how to hold a student to restrain them, but how to transport a student. If you have a student who is out of control and you need to transport them from their classroom to a safer place in the building, there are particular ways that you can transport without hurting the student or yourself. It also includes a whole battery of de-escalation. How can you de-escalate that behavior? And there are certain things that you do or could do that will escalate the student. And so this training provides the ways for you to de-escalate that student, to maybe solve the problem without having to do anything, without having to restrain at all. So it's very, very intensive training. It takes a whole day, I think an 8-hour day. And when you take the training, you actually practice how to restrain appropriately and how to transport appropriately. It's not just sitting and learning about it, but it's actually, okay, Tammy, you and Cammie are going to demonstrate for us how to take Greg down to another location, and this is how we have to do that. So it's very, very good. Megan Ritchie, who's a social worker at the high school, is our CPI trainer, and she attended, a couple weeks of training this summer. And prior to that, Neil Lefebvre, who's the EI teacher at Murphy, was our trainer. And you have to be recertified every 2 years. So you're trained, and then every 2 years you have to be recertified to be a trainer. So it's very necessary. I mean, we have not trainers, but trained paras and teachers in every one of our buildings. So if I'm in a classroom, my Gen Ed classroom, and I'm having experienced difficulty, I know that I can call, and I know that somebody on the staff, one of these key personnel people, will be able to come and help, to appropriately help with that situation.
I was amazed to find out, so the person who was doing the session was about a 5-foot, 110-pound female who could de-escalate the situation and physically restrain somebody twice her size. So you didn't just have to grab,
Right,
you know,
right,
the late great John Rowan
right.
for who was a 6'7", 280-pound guy to try to handle students that they were in. And to physically have to practice that was really helpful. You know, just to see how you hold somebody, so you're not just only protecting them, but protecting yourself
Absolutely.
and protecting all the other students.
And anybody
there's
around
good ways
you.
to do it, yeah.
Right, right.
And I learned a lot in a short period of time about it, so I think it is really valuable to have that.
You know, just, this really doesn't have anything to do with CPI, but our EI teachers, our teachers of the emotionally impaired, are very experienced and well-trained folks. We have a gentleman at the middle school, Ross Baker, and of course Neil Lefebvre at Murphy. And to watch them work with very difficult children is really an amazing experience,
Yeah.
because they do practice and implement all those strategies, these de-escalation strategies. You know, their calmness and their demeanor and the way they approach students is really almost a work of art in some respects. And when you meet someone who is really good at that craft, and they're special people. And we're very fortunate to have those two men on our staff, because they are very good at what they do. So,
And the retraining stuff for all those things is good, because they do research practices where they find out what is effective or what not, and then try to make adjustments on it. So, you know, it's kind of a pain, but it's effective. And I do like the fact that they actually take research and data on all this stuff. And school I'm at currently, the person does the CPR training. Right after the CPR training, 2 years in a row, the students had to save on spring break when they were pulled over helping at an accident, which most people don't realize. Usually when you're doing CPR, the person's not going to make it. So to get 2 saves right after their training
Well,
it's amazing, huh?
it
Yeah,
was
that's
against all odds,
Yeah.
but, you know, it was kind of neat though. You know, so I'm a big fan of the CPR training, to be honest. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just a cautionary note on the civics and the immigration test, the naturalization and immigration service test. It's going to be focused on federal law and what it means to be a U.S. citizen. And I think we often miss the boat in civics by not teaching state and local government and the theories. Each state has evolved entirely different traditions based upon when they achieve statehood. And too many students are kind of missing the boat on understanding government programming and how it works. And if they move to a different part of the country, they will be unaware as to how many differences there are in what is done at the state and local level, getting down to the point of areas that don't have zoning laws. We have zoning laws, and the areas of the country that don't have zoning laws and don't deal with flood waters very well. So my concern is always that we're missing the boat on the full breadth of government when we rely on, and it's not our doing, it's
Those questions are all, it's all rote learning, it's all surfacey, it's all totally, you could memorize it in a day if you have to. I mean, it would be embarrassing if we had graduates who were posed those questions and couldn't answer.
Right.
I get that. But
to be the basis.
it's, anyway. About a couple of things. One was, again, you know, my involvement with the policies, every little, you know, thing, a new topic you came up with, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember that policy revision. Oh yeah, I remember how, you know, we had to change those words and stuff. So it is actually kind of nice to sit here and know that we went through all those policies, we have Neola, and really every time that one of these things changes, we're getting the new policy or the tweak or the new guideline, and it's kind of nice to know that's all taken and coming along. Even though in some of them we have been asked to change them one way and change another way too. So, but that's fine. That's how it goes. So it's nice to see. And then, you know, I was also noted that of the whole list, which I don't remember how many. What was it? 8 or something? 8. So if I remember correctly, 2 of them sort of put more tools in local control, and 6 of them were taking them away. I mean, so I guess there's 2 that, with the weapons and the zero tolerance, are movements toward what we appreciate about having local control. And then, you know, whether it's something that the seclusion restraint, where we see some positive, or CPR training, we see some positive actions, but yet it's still just another, you know, throw another thing. And made me wonder too, if we have any idea what it's cost us to implement these new.
Because I'm sure we were
Things.
provided with the funding to do
Yes,
that.
no,
he says sarcastically.
yes.
Well, I was also observing that maybe 2 of them had something to do with curriculum content, and the rest of them are not necessarily.
Yep.
Well, 3 possibly, genocide, civics, and
Oh,
third
okay.
grade reading law, possibly.
Well, and I'm sorry, the genocide one left out indigenous people. but,
Yes.
um,
But Armenian, just, we're gonna know about that.
Yeah, yeah. But I also do appreciate how our staff is very much on top of all these changes, and whenever you talk with us, you are very well-versed in what the changes are and what we need to do and what we will do next. So thank you very much.
Well, our staff is, I did compliment a couple of our special ed teachers this evening, but generally speaking, to look at all of the changes, whether they're curriculum or not, staff, we rarely hear staff complain about having to do professional development for this, or they see, or we try to at least put it in a way that helps them to understand that this is really good for our students. It's more, but more in this case may not be bad. So we try to be positive about that because we know there are going to be more things on the list next year.
Well, and the challenge becomes finding the time to do all the training, and when do you
Yes.
do it? Because if you're
Yes.
taking teachers out of the classroom, then, they're not instructing it. So, there's just only so much time to do all these trainings. So a lot of it's just a big puzzle, making sure that you can do everything within a certain amount of time. And
Yes,
that's a
and
huge challenge.
We struggle with that just today when we talk about the suicide awareness training for staff. And that's an hour and a half, and when do we find the hour and a half? And when we find it, we will be taking something else out of that slot to put that in. So there's a lot of
It's a
stuff.
zero-sum game still.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to sort of build on the sentiment of how prepared we are as a district, but also it's yet another example of being proud of how many things you've indicated we were already doing it or had a structure in place to do it, or and like you said, the teachers are embracing, they recognize the importance of doing it, even if we weren't exactly doing it in the
Right.
prescribed way yet, but
Right.
we were close. So I just appreciate that, again, district-wide, that we are already on top of so many things, utilizing best practices, and as we always say, what's in the best interest of the student.
And even third grade reading law, I think, is a good example, because as I sit with groups of people at the ISD and people talk about third grade reading law, people are going, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're going to do this, and what about that, and what are you doing? And I kind of sit there and think, well, really, there's only 2 or 3 things we're going to worry about here, and it's not going to be a huge problem for us. But I don't think that's the norm. And in many school districts, they may or may not be prepared to even begin to implement. And really, quite frankly, I believe that's why we have the third grade reading law. As you
Because those
recall,
are right.
we didn't have last year really any students that wouldn't have had an exemption because of disabilities or ELL or something. So we're already positioned quite well to implement something like that. And so we're not panicking, we're just gonna, okay, we're already doing, what are the 2 or 3 things we have to think about? We can do that.
But it's because you're always, you've got, dedicated staff who are staying up in their profession, always looking for other ways to enhance what they're doing for their students, same with their administrators, open to new ideas, network with other people, and so those things are coming along, from those efforts.
Well, is it the Easy Street? Is that the name of the program?
Reading
Reading
Street.
Street. Easy Street. Okay, Reading Street. Yes, it is. Well, Reading Street, we've used that for a really long
Yes, we have.
time. And it's a home support program for readers. And what I was always impressed with it was the reading content was really good for boys.
It was.
It's really good.
It
There was
is,
a
yeah.
lot of really
You're right.
interesting reading.
There's a lot of nonfiction,
Yes.
informational reading in Reading
Yes.
Street, which is
It was
the
very
first time
interesting.
you've seen that in a core program. A lot of the early core programs years ago were fiction. And boys generally don't really like fiction as much as they like informational reading. And so Reading Street, that's one of the first things we noticed when we adopted Reading Street was, oh my goodness, look at all the informational reading there
Yeah.
is.
It was
They're
very
learning
good,
everything.
very good content.
Right.
Very good, so, I
Right.
mean, we've been doing that for a long
Yes,
time.
we have. 8 years, 10 years.
Well, and with that, I know in the libraries and being able to have, especially like my boys, like then they find the books that build on that or they find the things they've been interested in. So it's been, there's a nice complement between the curriculum and then what's available in the library and how that all works together,
Right.
so.
But you will hear our elementary principals say, we enforced or required our teachers to implement Reading Street with fidelity. And they had to teach the program the way the program was intended to be taught. Not every district did that. And so as a result of really teaching Reading Street the way it was intended to be taught, I mean, they say this is a research-based program. If you do this program, your students will do well. But not if you don't teach the program the way it's intended to be taught. And so we did require that. Not all districts did. And then they would say, gosh, you know, it's not working for us. Well, are you teaching it with fidelity? Well, no, you know, we didn't think this was important and we changed this or that. Well, you
It's
know,
no longer the
there's
same program.
It's not the same program. That's right. And you don't get the same result. So, that's it.
So I don't think we ever heard the answer to the money question, actually. Or
I
is
don't know
that-
how you, you know,
how you
I
measure
don't know
that.
that it costs actual dollars, but it costs time.
The time.
And so
Opportunity
the
cost.
time is, I don't know how you measure that.
They'll substitute teacher costs when you're taking
Well, unless
faculty
you
out.
do it on PD days, we have 5 PD days, so we try to do it during PD time. But yes, if we pull out. It did cost to train bus drivers, we had to pay them an extra couple of hours. So. But I would like to think our bus drivers are doing a better job with relating to students now because they understand some students that may have behavior problems. They can't just say, sit down in your seat and it'll work.
Right.
There might be a way to say that differently. With encouraging them in a different way, I don't know, so.
Anybody else? Well, thanks very much. It was very interesting to see in the box, you know, things again that we've kind of heard about over the last bit, but.
You can thank Mr. Dietzel.
Thank you. We will do that. All right. We will then move on to board reports, Policy and Personnel Committee.
We have not met since our last full board meeting, but we do meet next week.
Awesome. Okay. Finance and Facilities.
We have not met either.
Okay. Items from board members. Does anybody?
I just want to echo the sentiments about Bye Bye Birdie. I was really impressed with the acting in that particular performance. And I never even heard of it before.
Yeah.
So I wish a few more people had attended. You know, I think they've been pleasantly surprised. So anyway, that was all.
It was awesome, and actually, it was my first time seeing the new front of the Performing Arts Center
Yeah,
too, and that was, you know, you'd showed us, I'd seen pictures that you'd joined before, but it was very nice to kind of experience that in person
And some of our recent graduates were really impressed by
Were they?
the new stage, the new
Yes.
foyer.
Yeah, it was nice. Anybody else? Well, I'll just say, please, I don't want to take any cookies home, so I hope that those of us here, including those in the audience, feel free to take cookies with you as well. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to action items. We have a whole really long list of them today. The approval of the minutes of the November 13th regular meeting. Anybody?
So
want that
moved.
pulled? Okay, moved. Second. So, okay, moved to approve with a second. All right, all in favor of approving the action item, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Announcements. So we do have these upcoming committee meetings. Finance and Facilities is meeting on December 7th at 3:30 PM. I really should do this. Policy Personnel is meeting December 8th, 2017 at 7:30 a.m., and both of those committee meetings are here in the Hazard Administration Building. Our next regularly scheduled board meeting will be held on Monday, December 11th at 7 PM. That'll be our only meeting in December, our regular board meeting, and then our next one will be January 8th, 2017 at 7. With that, if anyone would care to move for us to adjourn, I would entertain that.
I'll move that we adjourn.
Second, all right, all in favor of adjourning, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries, we are adjourned. Thank you.